The church smelled of white roses and incense, so thick it made my stomach turn. I told myself it was nerves, not the nausea, not the secret curling low in my belly, just nerves. I stood at the altar with my hands folded carefully over silk and lace, smiling the way an Omega is expected to smile when he's about to be married into a powerful Alpha family. My mate, my soon-to-be husband, stood across from me, tall and radiant in black and silver. This was supposed to be the safest day of my life. The moment I felt it, I knew something was wrong. His scent, strong, familiar, faltered, just for a second, like a flame gasping for air. "Henry," I whispered, barely moving my lips. He didn't answer. His fingers twitched in mine, then went slack. Someone laughed softly in the pews, thinking it was part of the ceremony. Then Henry swayed. The last thing Henry ever did was squeeze my fingers. Not hard, not urgently, just once, like a promise he hadn't finished saying. Then he collapsed. The church erupted, but I heard nothing beyond the sound of my own heartbeat crashing in my ears. Someone screamed my name. Someone else pulled me backward as his body hit the marble floor. I never saw his eyes close. That was the part that haunted me later. They dragged me away before I could touch him again. People rushed in. Alphas barked orders. White coats knelt over him, blocking my view, blocking my answers. I kept waiting for someone to say he's breathing. No one did. He was rushed to the hospital. I wasn't allowed to go. Hours later, they returned without him. That's when they told me Henry Ellison was dead. The nurses said it was heart failure. Just like that, I was a widow. Henry's body was returned 3 days later, sealed inside a casket. I stood beside it in black, my hands folded carefully over my stomach, my spine straight despite the weight crushing my lungs. The scent of morning roses clung to everything, heavy and suffocating. People whispered. They always do when an Omega stands alone. Was the bond complete? Did he finish the vows? I kept my eyes on the casket, because if I looked away, they might see the truth. I wasn't alone. The child stirred faintly inside me, like it knew the world had shifted, like it knew its father was gone before it ever felt his arms. The funeral ended as the sun dipped low. That evening, I was summoned for a family meeting. No condolences, no softness, just business. Now that Henry is no more, one of the elders said calmly, and the vows were never completed, you are free to leave this family and find another mate. Free. The word felt cruel. I had nowhere to go. Henry had been my whole world. We had been together for 3 years. I grew up in an orphanage. I met him at 19 while working in a small coffee shop, still sleeping in a shared room at the home. He took me from there, loved me, built a life with me, and now his family wanted me gone. How could I leave when I was already carrying his child? Should I tell them? Before I could speak, a voice cut through the silence. He's not leaving. Everyone turned. Henry's brother stood up. I'll finish what my brother started, he said, his voice steady, unyielding. Henry wanted Theo to be part of this family. That hasn't changed. The room went deathly quiet. No Alpha will claim him, he continued. Because I will. I'll finish the vows. The silence Silas created was heavier than the rose-scented air of the funeral. It was the silence of a collapsing wall, a sound that existed only in the ears of those who stood beneath it. I stared at Henry's brother, Silas Ellison. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to fly. I have a choice, I told myself. I can reject him, but the image of the orphanage, the shared, freezing room, the constant hunger, flashed through my mind. And then the pressure low in my abdomen. Henry's child. If I left, I was guaranteeing destitution and shame for my son or daughter before they drew a single breath. Silas, Elder Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained. You are the acting alpha of the house now. You cannot simply claim an Omega without a completed bond, especially one who is mated to your brother. Silas didn't turn his head, making his declaration a command. The vows were interrupted. The life was not, he said, his voice a low, steady counterpoint to Henry's memory. Henry claimed you. The debt belongs to the house. Theo stays. Debt. I whispered, the word stinging. Silas finally shifted his gaze, meeting mine. My brother loved you, Theo. He intended for you to be protected. If you leave, you take that protection with you. And you will be unprotected. He knows, I thought, a sudden cold dread washing over me. He knows I'm carrying Henry's child. But how could he? I hadn't even told Henry's mother. The elder cleared his throat, sensing the shift in the power dynamic. Theo, you have heard the offer. You are free to refuse. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. My silk wedding suit had been replaced by funeral black, but my omega scent, usually sweet and calm for Henry, spiked with distress. If I said no, I would trade a life of power and security for a life where I was a poor, unmated omega carrying a dead alpha's heir, a social pariah. If I said yes, I would be exchanging a gentle, loving mate for his brother. Felt like betrayal. I took a breath that tasted like ashes. I straightened my spine, mirroring Silas's own posture. I accept, I said, the words brittle and strange. I will stay and become Silas's mate. A collective sigh swept the room. It sounded like disappointment. Silas's silver eyes flickered once. A minuscule reaction that disappeared before I could read it. Good, he said. The wedding will be held privately in 3 days. We cannot afford the scandal of a prolonged engagement. 3 days? The world tilted. Henry wasn't even cold in the ground. Sir, I interjected, the alpha address coming naturally despite my shock. 3 days is too soon. Out of respect for Henry, Silas's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. I know it feels too soon, Theo. I am not trying to erase Henry, nor do I want to rush your grief. But every day you remain unclaimed brings risks. Risks I cannot allow. The weight in my chest eased just slightly. His words were firm. That night, I found myself standing alone in the massive master bedroom Henry and I had shared. The room smelled of Henry. A ghost of his cologne lingered on the velvet curtains. His favorite worn jacket still draped over the back of the chaise lounge. It was a beautiful, unbearable scent. The door clicked open and Silas entered. He was dressed in soft gray cotton now, his formality stripped away, making him look younger, perhaps even more dangerous. He walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer, pulling out a stack of clothes, my clothes. Pack these, he said, placing them on the bed. You will take the guest suite near my office. This room will only make you dwell on memories that hurt. We're not sharing a room yet? I asked, surprised and oddly relieved. He looked at me with an expression that was neither cold nor harsh, but deliberate. Theo, I will not disrespect my brother's memory by sleeping with his intended mate before the ceremony. We will live separately until the day you become my husband. He turned, picked up Henry's jacket from the chaise, folded it carefully, and placed it inside a high, carved chest at the foot of the bed. It was a gesture of respect, a quiet burial of a memory. But the lingering way his fingers brushed the fabric just before releasing it suggested he understood the weight of what he was doing. Then Silas looked back at me. Rest, Omega. You have 3 days. With that, he left, leaving me in the silence of Henry's ghost. I didn't pack. I simply picked up the clothes Silas had placed on the bed, 4 sets of loungewear and a black silk robe, and carried them in a neat, defeated stack out of the room. The scent of Henry was too suffocating, the presence of his ghost too loud. The guest suite was on the ground floor, far from the alpha wing where Henry's and Silas's rooms were located. It was large but impersonal, smelling only of sterile polish and fresh linen. It offered a kind of anonymity that felt like mercy. The next morning, I wasn't woken by the gentle alarm Henry used to set for me. I was woken by a sharp, aggressive knock. I pulled on the silk robe and opened the door to find Mrs. Ellison standing there. Henry's mother. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face a brittle mask of grief sharpened into fury. She was a formidable alpha woman, accustomed to obedience and control. She didn't offer a greeting. She simply pushed past me into the room, her presence flooding the space with the bitter scent of crushed herbs and concentrated anger. "Where is Silas?" she demanded, her gaze sweeping the suite with clear disdain. "He is in his office, attending to the duties of the alpha," I answered, keeping my voice level. He should be attending to his brother's memory, she snapped, turning on me. Not playing house with the reason my Henry is dead. I froze. Ma'am, Henry's death was heart failure. The doctors confirmed it. Do you think I believe the doctors? She spat, advancing on me. Henry was strong, healthy, but you drove him to distraction with your endless needs. You pressed him for vows, pressed him for legitimacy, and now he is gone. And you're still here, poisoning this house. Her words struck like physical blows. My hands moved instinctively to my stomach, a reflex I instantly regretted. I made no demands, I whispered, forcing myself to stand my ground. Henry and I were happy. Happiness. She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You were an orphan, Omega, a charity case. Henry was fulfilling his duty, raising you up, preparing you for a place in society, and you repaid him by killing him with worry. And now Silas has lost his mind and claimed you for himself. What lie did you tell him? Silas claimed me to keep me safe, I said, stepping past her. It was his decision, not mine. She caught my wrist, her grip iron-hard. Safe? She hissed. Do you think the protection of an Ellison is given freely? Silas is a man of duty, not sentiment. He has claimed you because you have something he wants, or because you're hiding something that threatens this family. She pulled me closer, her breath hot against my ear. I will find it, Theo. And when I do, I will make sure you're thrown onto the street before you disgrace the Ellison name again. She shoved me back violently. My shoulder struck the wall, the impact sharp enough to drive the air from my lungs. A sudden, searing pain flared low in my abdomen. I gasped, clutching myself as panic surged. Mrs. Ellison's eyes narrowed, finally noticing the protective way my hand shielded my belly. What is it? She asked, her voice turning cold and calculating. The silence stretched, tight, dangerous. Then a new presence filled the room. The door burst open. Silas stood framed in the doorway. He hadn't bothered to knock. He must have followed his mother's scent, the biting edge of her rage. His gaze went first to me, pale, shaking, pressed against the wall, then to his mother, whose expression had shifted into sharp suspicion. The icy cedar scent of Silas's alpha flooded the suite, dense and unmistakable. A warning. Mother, Silas said, his voice low and flat with controlled fury. Leave. Mrs. Ellison bristled. Silas, you can't be blind. This Omega. I said leave. He stepped fully into the room. His scent hit her like a physical force. Even the formidable alpha matriarch faltered, recognition flashing in her eyes as she felt the full authority of the acting alpha of the house settle into place. She shot me one last poisonous look, then turned and left, slamming the door behind her. Silas remained where he was for a long moment, watching me. I was still trembling, struggling to steady my breathing, the echo of her words clawing at my chest. Finally, he closed the distance between us. He didn't touch me, but he stood close enough that his presence enclosed me, his scent firm and grounding. Did she hurt you? He asked, silver eyes scanning my face. I shook my head, unable to meet his gaze. Only her words. Did she lay a hand on you? He asked again. I hesitated, then slowly raised my wrist, revealing the faint red marks already blooming against my skin. Silas's jaw tightened. His alpha scent deepened, the air thick with restrained fury and possessive protection. She will not touch you again, he said, each word deliberate. From now on, you will not leave the suite without a guard, or without me. Do you understand? I nodded. Fear and relief tangled tightly in my chest. I was trading one kind of confinement for another, but this one came with a warden who wasn't trying to destroy me. For the next 2 days, the guest suite became my sanctuary and my cage. Silas was true to his word. I had a maid assigned specifically to my floor, and I did not step foot outside without a guard, or without Silas himself. His mother did not approach me again. The Alpha's office was right down the hall. I could hear the muffled sounds of his work, the decisive click of a pen, the low rumble of his voice on phone calls, the heavy thud of ledgers being opened and closed. He was running the house, running the empire, and preparing for an emergency wedding, all with the efficiency of an automaton. Late on the evening before the wedding, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the tentative sound of the maid. It was firm, measured, and unmistakably Silas. I opened the door. He wasn't wearing his suit, but a sharp, dark blazer over a crisp white shirt. He held a thin, sealed manila envelope. "We need to sign these," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His scent was still the same cold cedar, but tonight it carried a subtle thread of fatigue, a quiet edge of tension. He placed the envelope on the desk. Inside were 2 documents: a marriage license for Silas and me, and Henry's will. "Henry finalized this 3 weeks ago," Silas explained, indicating the will. "He changed some minor clauses regarding his art collection and designated you as the sole beneficiary of his personal, non-family assets, including the cottage he bought for our parents in the mountains." My throat tightened. He bought them a cottage? "Yes, a gift," Silas confirmed, glancing briefly at the document, avoiding my gaze. "He was always generous. But the key point is the main clause. It makes 2 requirements for the omega of the house after his death." Silas traced the paper with 1 finger. "First, the omega must remain within the Ellison family estate until the alpha bond is completed, or until 2 years have passed. Second, if the alpha bond is not completed, and you leave, you forfeit all assets except the mountain cottage." My head spun. Henry, in his loving thoughtfulness, had both protected and trapped me. "He didn't trust his own family," I whispered. Silas looked up, his silver eyes sharp and unwavering. "He didn't trust them to prioritize your welfare over their business interests. Henry was naive about many things, but he understood the cold equation of family politics. He ensured that if you were forced out, you would at least have a secured place to live. But if I left, I'd be an omega, alone and visibly pregnant, trying to raise an alpha heir in a cottage. Henry's protection was a life raft, but Silas's claim was the whole ship. By marrying you, I nullify the 2-year waiting period and complete the bond," Silas stated, his tone purely factual. "The protection is immediate, and the legacy is sealed. The family cannot contest your status as the alpha mate." He pulled a gold pen from his inner jacket pocket and offered it to me. "Sign here on the license. This will be filed early tomorrow." My hand was shaking. I picked up the pen, its gold cold against my skin. I signed my name, Theo, beneath Silas's stark, forceful signature. We were now legally bound, even if the ritual bond was still a day away. "And this," Silas said, sliding over the second document, "a prenuptial agreement drafted overnight. It grants you full financial control of your personal estate and guarantees a fixed annuity, regardless of the fate of our marriage. If we divorce, you leave with financial independence and the cottage." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, finally unable to contain myself. "You hated the idea of Henry marrying an omega like me. I heard the rumors." Silas leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Henry and I never saw eye to eye on sentimentality. I thought he was too soft. I thought he allowed his personal feelings to interfere with the future of the house." He paused, holding my gaze. "But he was my brother. He chose you, and he loved you. The Ellison name must take the responsibility Henry promised. Theo, my duty is to make sure you're safe." He closed the file, sealing the 2 documents back into the envelope. "You have nothing to fear from me, Theo. Only protection. Get some rest. The vows are tomorrow." He stood to leave but paused at the door, turning back slowly. His silver eyes searched mine, with a strange, heavy intensity that made my chest tighten. "There is one more thing," he said, pulling a small black velvet box from his blazer. He didn't hand it to me. He simply placed it on the desk near my signature. "Henry chose your wedding ring, but this is the Alpha's vow token." He didn't elaborate. He simply left, the door clicking softly shut behind him. I walked to the desk, my legs unsteady. I opened the box. Inside, nestled on the black velvet, was a single, heavy platinum band, unadorned and powerful. Engraved deeply on the inside were 3 initials, simple and chilling, S, It was a claim, promise, and somehow, in that one object, I felt the weight of everything. Henry's love, Silas's claim, and the uncertain future that awaited me. I woke on the morning of my second wedding with a knot of nausea and grief so tight it was difficult to breathe. I was still in the guest suite, separated from the alpha wing by a silent, impersonal corridor. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the 2 rings resting on the nightstand. One was Henry's, a simple silver band with a single, delicate carving of a flowering vine, the design we had chosen together. The other was Silas's, heavy platinum, etched with the chilling initials S.E. Henry's ring represented a future of light, shared warmth, and choice. Silas's ring was a cuff of duty, a solid barrier against a hostile world, purchased at the cost of my protection. The maid arrived promptly, carrying a dark gray suit that was immaculate, severe, and unmistakably chosen by Silas. No silk, no lace, just crisp wool. It was the omega attire of a high-ranking political partner, not a loving mate. "The ceremony will be held in the family library, sir," the maid informed me, her eyes lowered. "Only the elders, Mrs. Ellison, and the legal counsel will be present." As she pinned a single white rose to my lapel, I caught my reflection. My eyes looked too large, too haunted, but the suit fit perfectly, a kind of armor against the day. My guard, a large, silent beta, escorted me down the corridor. Every footstep felt like a movement toward a point of no return. The library was dim, lined with towering mahogany shelves. The elders stood stiffly, Elder Marcus holding the leather-bound book of Vows. Mrs. Ellison stood slightly apart, radiating disapproval like heat from a furnace. Silas waited at the head of the room beside a small, heavy table where the marriage license lay. He wore black, a color he seemed born to wear, and his presence absorbed the light and silence around him. When my guard stopped and gestured for me to proceed, Silas looked at me. It was a quick, piercing assessment. I walked the remaining distance alone. The ceremony was brief, clinical, and stripped of God or romance. Elder Marcus read the civil script, omitting all references to love, hope, or fidelity. Only legal union, only commitment to the family name. Then came the vows, the part Henry had never finished. Silas turned to me, his silver eyes finally holding mine. "Theo," he said, his voice flat but unshakable. "My brother intended to take you as his mate. His intentions are the law of this house. By my authority as Alpha, I complete his promise." He picked up the silver band, Henry's ring. "This is the memory," he said, sliding it onto my finger first. Felt like a cold kiss from a ghost. "The vow of love that was given." Then he lifted the platinum ring. "And this," Silas continued, pressing it beside the silver band, "is the reality, the vow of protection that will be kept." He didn't ask me to speak. He took my hands and enclosed them in his. "You are mine, Omega," he said quietly. "You belong to the Ellison house. You are safe." It was the coldest vow imaginable. Not a promise of love, but of shelter, authority, and survival. The elder concluded the ceremony quickly. Mrs. Ellison turned away, muttering something about the disrespect of the entire affair. The final step remained, non-negotiable, unavoidable. The Alpha bond. Silas reached for my hand and guided me toward the table. His palm was warm. He unfastened the top button of my high-collared shirt and shifted the fabric aside, exposing the sensitive skin of my bonding gland. I stiffened, breath-catching. This was meant to be intimate, passionate, not silent. My omega instincts surged, fear tangled with a deep, biological urge to yield. Silas paused. His face was close, his gaze searching mine. He saw the fear but also the acceptance. He inhaled slowly, drawing in my distressed scent. His own deepened, cedar and ozone filling the room with a silent command. "Do not panic." Then he lowered his head. The bite was controlled, precise, a firm puncture through skin. I gasped as pain flared, sharp and immediate, followed by heat. His saliva entering my bloodstream, his alpha markers sealing the bond. My legs gave out. Silas caught me instantly, one arm locking around my waist. His mouth remained at my neck, holding me steady as the bond took root, asserting his presence over the ghost of Henry. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was uneven. He studied the mark, a deep red bloom against my skin, then my face. "It is finished," he murmured. "The vow is complete." He didn't kiss me. He simply held me until the dizziness passed. I was irrevocably Silas's. Later that afternoon, I was escorted not to the guest suite, but to the master bedroom. Silas stood inside, stacking papers neatly on the desk. "This is your room now," he said. "The mate belongs in the master suite." He paused. "We are bound, Theo. But the bond does not mean you are required to do anything you do not want to do." "Thank you," I managed, my fingers drifting to the throbbing ache at my neck, the permanent seal of his claim. His gaze followed the movement, unreadable. "You are not a captive," he said calmly. "You are the alpha mate." He turned toward the door. "I will sleep in the guest suite for the meantime." Then he left. A month later, the throbbing on my neck was a constant, dull reminder of the bond. I traced the bite mark, Silas's precise, authoritative claim, with a tentative finger. It was done. I was the alpha mate of the Ellison house. I was safe, but safety felt like a velvet box, soft, luxurious, and closed. I stood alone in the master suite, facing Silas's private safe, hidden behind a painting of a severe-looking Ellison ancestor. I wasn't ready for numbers, ledgers, or assets. I needed something else. I needed closure. I inserted the small silver key I had noticed earlier on the table beside the safe. It unlocked with a single click. Inside, the safe was neat, almost bare. A thin packet of legal papers, a small jeweler's box, and a single folded letter, yellowed and crisp at the edges. My breath caught. I reached for the letter first. It was addressed to me in Henry's familiar looping handwriting. I sank onto the chaise lounge, the paper trembling in my hands. "My dearest Theo, if you are reading this, then I have broken my promise. I promised you forever, but it seems forever was shorter than I imagined. I am so sorry, my love." Tears blurred the ink almost immediately. "I'm writing this because I know my heart is weak. I haven't told you the full truth about my condition. I didn't want to cast a shadow over our happiness. But I made preparations, not for my death, but for your future." My chest tightened. "You are carrying our child." "I know. I smelled the change in your pheromones the morning you thought you were only nauseous. It was the happiest day of my life, but it meant I had to act fast. Even Silas knows." I told him. A sob slipped free before I could stop it. "I knew Mother and the elders would try to cast you out. They see you as an expense, not an asset. That is why I had to bring Silas into the plan." My vision swam. I asked him, "Theo." I begged him to claim you if I died before the vows were complete. I stopped breathing. Silas hadn't acted out of duty alone. He had acted on Henry's direct request. Silas is cold, yes, but he is the only one strong enough to keep you safe from them. He values stability above all else, and you and our child are now the key to Ellison's stability. He will protect you absolutely. He will not love you, but he will not break you. I pressed the letter to my chest, the ache almost unbearable. "One more thing. There is a jeweler's box. The ring inside belonged to my mother, a traditional piece I inherited. It is meant for the alpha mate, but I could never make you wear it. It's hideous." Despite myself, a broken laugh escaped me. "The diamonds, however, are real. That ring is your insurance. If Silas ever fails you, or if you decide safety is not worth your soul, sell them and run. Don't look back. You will have more than enough to start a quiet life for you and our baby. It is your way out." Fresh tears spilled freely now. "I leave you with the one person I know will never allow harm to touch you. Trust his protection if you cannot trust his heart. My love always, Henry." The tears on my cheeks were not only grief. They carried gratitude, awe, and a painful, clarifying realization. Henry hadn't been naive. He had been brilliant. He had orchestrated my future from beyond the grave. Silas wasn't merely my protector. He was Henry's silent, unloving proxy. I opened the jeweler's box. Inside lay a grotesquely large, ornate diamond cluster ring. Truly hideous, exactly as Henry had promised. It felt heavy and cold in my palm, a glittering promise of freedom. The last item in the safe was the thin packet of legal papers. At first glance, insurance forms, until I reached the final document. A detailed medical history. Henry's records didn't simply say heart failure. They detailed a rare, aggressive deterioration of the alpha-bonding gland. Note: if the condition becomes acute, the patient may suffer sudden systemic failure under high emotional stimulus, particularly stress caused by an incomplete, intense alpha bond. The vows. Henry hadn't died despite the ceremony. He had died because of it. The overwhelming emotional intensity of bonding with me, combined with his hidden fragility, had been the lethal trigger. The squeeze of his fingers, the look in his eyes, the sheer, awful beauty of that moment had killed him. I closed the safe, horror and love twisting together into a single, aching wound. Henry had sacrificed himself for our future. And Silas was simply honoring the contract. Later that evening, the heavy footsteps I was learning to recognize, the footsteps of a man carrying a dead brother's promise, paused outside the master suite. The door opened. Silas entered. He stopped just inside the room, his frame outlined by the dim hall light. His gaze swept over me, taking in my position on the chaise. The tear streaks I knew were on my face, and the open safe behind me. His eyes lingered on the letter clutched in my hand. A profound stillness settled over him. The usual mask of detached control didn't snap into place. Instead, he looked weary to his bones. "You found it," he said, his voice a low rasp. It wasn't a question. I held up Henry's letter, the paper fluttering with the tremor in my hand. "You promised him." Silas closed the door softly behind him. He didn't approach, as if giving a wounded animal space. "Yes." The single word held galaxies of meaning. "Yes, I promised. Yes, it was his request. Yes, this is why I did it." "He said he begged you," I whispered, the image of a desperate, dying Henry haunting me anew. Silas finally moved, walking to the window to look out at the darkening estate. His profile was sharp, etched with a pain he never allowed the world to see. "He didn't have to beg. He was my brother." He paused, his jaw working. "I told him it was a terrible idea, that I was the last person who could give you what he did." A sob caught in my throat. "But you said yes." He turned his head, his silver eyes meeting mine across the shadowed room. "Because he was right. I am the only one who could keep you safe from them. From her." My feelings on the matter were irrelevant. His were not. My feelings on the matter. The phrase echoed. He had feelings. He just deemed them unimportant next to his brother's dying wish and my security. "The medical report," I said, my voice breaking. "He died because of the bond. Because of the intensity of claiming me." Silas's shoulders stiffened. He gave a single curt nod, a stark admission of a shared, awful truth. "He knew the risk. He chose it. He chose you, Theo, right until the very last second." His heart gave out from the strain of a happiness it couldn't contain, not from a lack of it. The way he said it, with a fierce, defensive certainty, was the first time I heard Silas defend anything with passion. He was defending Henry's love for me. The dam inside me broke. A fresh wave of grief, now mingled with a staggering, painful gratitude, washed over me. I cried for Henry, for his brilliant, tragic plan. I cried for the immense, lonely burden Silas had shouldered without complaint. I didn't hear him cross the room, but suddenly he was there. He didn't touch me. He simply offered a clean, folded handkerchief, his large hand steady. "I am not him," Silas said, his voice gravelly with an emotion I couldn't name. "I cannot be. But every oath I have taken to you, the legal one, the spoken one, the bond, I will keep. Not just for him. For you." It was the closest he had ever come to acknowledging me as the reason, not just the obligation. The understanding forged that day didn't make us lovers. It made us allies. Life settled into a new rhythm. I took most of my meals in the suite, but Silas often joined me, our conversations still careful, though no longer limited to pure necessity. He asked about the baby. He brought me books from the library, ones Henry had once liked. He stopped a maid from removing Henry's favorite painting from the sitting area, a quiet, wordless acknowledgement of my grief. The external world, however, refused to stay quiet. Mrs. Ellison's campaign shifted from private venom to public poison. At a somber family dinner held to acknowledge the news of the Ellison heir, Silas had informed them 2 days earlier. Her smile was ablaze. "The pregnancy is such a blessing," she cooed to a table of ants, her voice deliberately carrying. "And so remarkably swift after the tragedy. Almost miraculous. One might wonder at the timing." The table fell silent. The implication hung in the air, toxic and unmistakable. "Is it even Henry's?" Before the hot shame could fully flood my cheeks, a sound cut through the silence. The sharp scrape of Silas's chair against the marble floor as he stood. His presence seemed to swell, filling the dining hall. His scent, usually so tightly leashed, rolled outward. Cedar and ozone and an unmistakable primal warning of alpha fury. Several of the younger betas instinctively lowered their eyes. "Mother." The word was not an address. It was a verdict. "You will apologize to my mate." "I only implied," she began, her own alpha nature bristling. "You implied a slander against the honor of your dead son, your living grandson, and the omega I have bonded to this house." Silas interrupted, his voice calm in a way that was far more frightening than shouting. "There will be no speculation. The child is Henry's heir, and Theo is my bonded mate. Any further doubt cast upon them will be considered a direct challenge to my authority, and it will be dealt with." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A line had been drawn in the sand of the Ellison dynasty, and he stood firmly on my side of it. Mrs. Ellison paled, the fight draining from her expression. She muttered a stiff, insincere apology. Later, back in our suite, my hands were still trembling. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. Silas was pouring a glass of water, his movements precise and controlled. "Yes, I did. I told Henry the first would keep you safe. That includes your reputation and our child's legacy." He handed me the glass, his fingers briefly steadying mine around it. "It also includes protecting you from ugliness at my own table," he continued. "I failed in that tonight. It will not happen again. Our child." The words settled heavily in my chest. It was a legal truth, a matter of inheritance and duty, but the way he said it just then felt like something more. Not a claim of ownership, but of belonging. 6 weeks later, the silence in the Ellison estate shattered. It began at midnight, sharp and sudden. A tearing pain that drew a gasp from my lips. I was alone in the master suite. Silas had moved in after the public dinner, but we still slept in separate dressing rooms, his promise of respect holding firm. The maid rushed in, frantic, immediately sending word to the Alpha Wing. Silas arrived not seconds later, having seemingly materialized from the shadows of the corridor. He was not in his suit, nor his crisp shirt, but a simple dark undershirt and trousers, his hair tousled, his alertness absolute. He took one look at my face, pale and slick with sweat, and bypassed the maid entirely. "Don't panic, Theo," he commanded, his voice deep and calm, the cedar scent of his alpha wrapping around me like a strong, steady vice. "I'm here." He wasn't Henry, who would have panicked with me, holding my hand and whispering soft words. Silas was a shield, a force of certainty in the chaos. He knelt beside the bed, his large, competent hands already checking the clock and assessing my breathing. "Where is the car?" he asked the maid. "Waiting, sir. I called the hospital." "Good. Stay with him." He stood, and for a fleeting second, his silver eyes met mine, a flicker of something raw and exposed passing between us. "Hold on. We're going now." The birth was long, exhausting, agonizing. In the sterile hospital room, Silas did not leave my side. I reached for his hand, gripping his forearm so hard my nails likely broke the skin. Silas didn't flinch. He leaned close, letting me draw on his immense, grounded strength. "Breathe, Theo," he murmured against my ear, his voice rough. "Just breathe. We're almost there. Finish the vow. Finish the vow." It wasn't Henry's vow of love I was finishing. It was Silas's vow of protection, the promise of stability for this child. When the final wave crashed over me, and the world dissolved into searing white pain, I heard the sound that cut through everything. A tiny, outraged cry. A new life. A true Ellison. Silas's grip on my arm finally eased, his hand moving to gently brush the hair from my forehead. When I opened my heavy eyes, he was staring at the small, bloody bundle the doctor held, his face expressionless, except for a single, glistening tear tracing a slow, silver path down his cheek. It was the first sign of vulnerability I had ever witnessed from him. He wiped it away quickly, but the image was etched into my memory forever. He held the baby with practiced, careful ease, walking him over to me. "A son," he said quietly, almost reverently. "A healthy alpha." I placed the child against my chest. The warmth, the scent, the deep, instinctive connection. It was overwhelming. "We will name him Henry," I whispered, already knowing the answer. Silas nodded. "Henry Silas Ellison. Henry for the father who loved him. Silas for the father who claimed him." A week later, we returned to the estate. The family, even Mrs. Ellison, now subdued by the reality of the new heir and Silas's recent display of authority, could do nothing but send lavish gifts. My status was secure, unbreakable. One quiet evening, I sat by the nursery window, rocking the baby, who slept peacefully. Silas stood in the doorway watching us. He held a glass of dark liquor. The ice cubes clinked softly. "I received a note today," he said, stepping into the room. "From your orphanage. They needed confirmation of the child's birth for their records." I stiffened. "And did you give it?" "I did better," he said, walking to my side. He placed a document on the window ledge beside me. "I purchased the land and buildings. The Ellison Trust will fund it. It is now registered as the Henry and Theo Ellison Home for Omegas and Betas." I looked up at him, shocked. "You used Henry's name?" "It was his sentimentality," Silas said, a barely perceptible half-smile crossing his face. "But it is my protection. You will never be alone, Theo. You will never be an orphan again." I reached out, running a finger over the heavy platinum ring on my hand. Silas's ring, and then over the silver ring beside it, Henry's. "Henry promised me forever," I said softly, looking down at the sleeping baby. Silas looked at me, steady, piercing, completely honest. "And I promised him safety," he countered, "and protection. And that is what you have now. The forever Henry gave you was bright but fragile. The forever I give you is cold, but absolute." He wasn't offering love in the simple, passionate sense. He was offering an unyielding, powerful bond of duty, respect, and survival. A forever built on steel, tragedy, and the quiet, undeniable understanding between two men bound by a ghost and a child. I looked at the alpha mate I had never chosen, yet who had chosen me, and at the precious, living vow in my arms. "Thank you, Silas," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. But these were not tears of grief. They were tears of a man finally truly safe.